It was November 1910. A private rail car, shades drawn, curtains sealed, quietly slipped out of a New Jersey station late at night. No announcement, no passenger manifest, no press. Inside that car sat 7 men, and between them they controlled, conservatively estimated, 1/4 of the entire wealth of planet Earth. They were not traveling together publicly. In fact, if anyone recognized them sharing the same car, they had been instructed to pretend they did not know each other. They used only first names the entire journey. Their destination was a private hunting island off the coast of Georgia, accessible only by boat, owned by J.P. Morgan himself. They would stay for 9 days, and when they left that island, the United States of America, and every dollar you have ever earned, saved, or lost would never be the same again. This is the story of Jekyll Island, and this is the story they never taught you in school. To understand why 7 of the most powerful men in America snuck onto a private island in the dead of November, you have to understand what America looked like in 1910. It was a nation exploding with energy. The Industrial Revolution had made America the largest economy on Earth. Factories were running, cities were growing. A working man, your grandfather's grandfather, could build something real, could save something real. The dollar meant something because the dollar was backed by something. Gold in a vault, tangible, honest. But there was a problem. Or rather, there was a narrative of a problem. Between 1873 and 1907, America experienced a series of financial panics. Banks would collapse, credit would freeze, ordinary people would lose savings overnight. The newspapers called it chaos, politicians called it a crisis, and the banking establishment, the very men who would later board that rail car, called it an emergency that required a solution. What they did not tell the public was this: many of these panics had been deliberately engineered, not by foreign enemies, not by economic forces beyond anyone's control, by the banks themselves. The most brazen example was the Panic of 1907. J.P. Morgan, the man who would later own the island, personally triggered a bank run by spreading rumors about a competitor's insolvency. When the financial system seized up and the public panicked, Morgan positioned himself as the savior, injecting liquidity, calming markets, playing the hero in a crisis he had manufactured. The lesson the banking elite took from 1907 was not shame, it was possibility. If one man, one private banker, could bring the entire American economy to its knees and then rescue it on his own terms, imagine what a permanent, institutionalized version of that power could do. That was the idea they brought to Jekyll Island. Now, before we go inside that room, I want you to do something. Think about your retirement account right now. Think about your savings. Think about every paycheck you've ever received and what it actually bought you compared to what it buys today. Hold that thought. Because what happened in that hunting lodge in November 1910 is the direct reason those numbers feel smaller than they should. Let's go inside. The 7 men who gathered at Jekyll Island were not random. Each one had been selected with surgical precision. Nelson Aldrich, Republican Senate Majority Whip, the most powerful legislator in America on financial matters. His daughter would later marry John D. Rockefeller, Jr. He was the political arm of the operation, the man who would later shepherd the legislation through Congress. Frank Vanderlip, president of National City Bank of New York, representing the Rockefeller financial empire. He would later write about this meeting in his own memoir, almost boasting about it. He described sneaking onto the train as furtively as any conspirator. Henry Davison, senior partner at J.P. Morgan & Company. Benjamin Strong,
another Morgan man. He would later become the first governor of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the most powerful position in the entire system they were about to design. Paul Warburg, a partner at Kuhn, Loeb and Company, a German-born banker who had spent years studying the central banking systems of Europe. He was, by most historical accounts, the architect, the man with the actual blueprint in his briefcase. Arthur Shelton, Aldrich's personal secretary, the note-taker. A. Pyatt Andrew, Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, the government's man in the room, ensuring whatever they designed could navigate Washington. 7 men. 2 are representing direct government authority. 5 represent the most powerful private banking dynasties in the Western world. And they are about to design America's monetary system, privately, secretly, without a single elected representative who wasn't already in their pocket. Here is what they built in those 9 days. A central bank, but not called a central bank, because Americans hated that idea. The 1830s fight over the second bank of the United States had made central bank a political death sentence. So they called it something else. The Federal Reserve System. 12 regional banks, appointed leadership, the illusion of public accountability, but private ownership, private profit, and permanent structural control over the supply of American money. Paul Warburg's fingerprints were on every page. The design was modeled explicitly on the Bank of England and the German Reich Bank, the exact central banking structures that European financial dynasties had used for 2 centuries to maintain control over sovereign governments. They had just imported that model secretly into the world's most powerful democracy.
Now, here is where it gets personal. Before Jekyll Island, if the government needed money, it had limited options. It could raise taxes and face voters. It could issue treasury notes directly, debt-free money accountable to the public. After Jekyll Island, the government would borrow money from the Federal Reserve, which is a private institution, which charges interest, which is owned in structure and in practice by the same banking families who designed it on that island. Every dollar the U.S. government has spent since 1913 on wars, on infrastructure, on social programs, has been borrowed money with interest paid by you through taxes. The national debt you hear about, it is not an accident of mismanagement. It is a feature. It was designed that way in November 1910 on a private island by 7 men who used only their first names. The Jekyll Island plan was not immediately enacted. It took 3 years, a presidential election, and a carefully managed public debate, all engineered to create the appearance of democratic deliberation. Aldrich introduced an early version of the plan. It was rejected, too obviously a banker's bill. So it was repackaged, renamed, given new political sponsors. Woodrow Wilson, who had campaigned on breaking up concentrated financial power, was shepherded into the presidency with significant backing from the very financial interests he claimed to oppose. On December 23, 1913, Christmas Eve, when most congressmen had already left Washington for the holidays, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. The Senate vote was 43 to 25. 36 senators were absent. The president signed it that evening. America had a central bank, and the men who had gathered secretly on Jekyll Island 3 years earlier had achieved with patience and precision exactly what they had planned in that fog-wrapped hunting lodge. Congressman Charles Lindbergh Sr., father of the famous aviator, stood on the floor of the House and said this: "This act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When the president signs this act, the invisible government by the money power will be legalized." Nobody listened. I want to be clear about something. This is not a theory. Frank Vanderlip, one of the 7 men in that room, wrote about Jekyll Island himself in the Saturday Evening Post in 1935. His words, not mine. He confirmed the secrecy. He confirmed the mission. He confirmed that what they built at Jekyll Island became the Federal Reserve Act. The meeting is documented. The participants are documented. The outcome is documented and has been governing American monetary policy for over 100 years. What is not documented, what has never been fully answered, is a simpler question. A question you have probably already thought of. If this was done for the American people to stabilize their economy, protect their savings, prevent future panics, why did it have to be secret? Jekyll Island was the beginning. What was built there in 1910 became the architecture upon which everything else was constructed. The petrodollar, the IMF, the World Bank, the mechanisms of inflation that have quietly transferred wealth from those who work for money to those who control money for over a century. The men who met that island are gone, but the institution they built is not. It sets your interest rates. It decides when credit is cheap and when it is expensive. It printed, in a single year, 2020, more dollars than had existed in the entire prior decade. And the inflation you felt at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in your retirement portfolio, that was not an accident of fate. That was the system working exactly as designed. But controlling your money was only the beginning, because the same men who built this system understood one thing very clearly. A financial empire is only safe if the people living inside it never fully understand what was done to them. And for that, they needed something else entirely. They needed to control what you heard, what you read, what you believed. In our next episode, we go inside Operation Mockingbird, the CIA's secret program that ran for nearly 3 decades, embedded hundreds of intelligence assets inside America's most trusted newspapers and television networks, and quietly shaped what an entire generation understood about the world they lived in. If Jekyll Island stole your money, Mockingbird stole your mind. That story is next.